Jesus, what was the religion of Jesus, do you think?
Judaism.
Exactly. So he followed the Torah, the 613 commandments of the law. He didn't follow the Unitarian Church, because that doesn't believe anything. It's a very, very, very liberal secular.
Exactly. So I don't necessarily mean the Unitarian Church Institute or the stream, but I mean Christianity without the Trinity concept, but like believing in God, believing that Jesus exists, but for example as a messenger, believing that there is a Holy Spirit or God in action in the world. So why not choose this one, for example, like Christian? Yeah, I know it sounds a bit weird if you say Christian and you don't believe in the Trinity, of course, but I mean.
Because there are other reasons why. Because I think history shows us a Jesus who was a Torah observant Jew. A Torah observant Jew. So he, like any good Jew, obeyed the law, the 613 commandments given to Moses by God on Mount Sinai. Is there in the Torah. I mean, why do I say that? Because Jesus' religion was not just belief in one God, it was belief in the law that was given to Moses. So we've got to obey God through his commandments, the mitzvah. Yeah, that's obviously part of the faith. You can't detach the law from God. He gave it to his people.
But if you're not born...
Sorry. But by analogy, Islam has a very, very similar system to the halakha, the Jewish legal system. It's called the Sharia. It's very, very similar. The place of the Sharia in a Muslim's life is very similar to that of the halakha in a Jew's life, an Orthodox Jew, I mean. The halakha is the Jewish law, the Torah. Yeah. So I understood that God had given a law to his people, to the Jews. And I also understood that God had also given a Sharia to the last prophet of God, Muhammad, who was sent by God. Very, very similar law. So I couldn't just be a Unitarian if God had actually sent commandments and a way of life, a deen as we call it, to his people. That comes with it. It's a whole package. It's not just a belief, it's a way of life. So take the example of pork, for example. The law of Moses prohibits pork. Jesus didn't eat pork, he never said we could. Muhammad, Islam, says you can't eat pork. It's a consistent thing here. Christians, however, believe that Paul said that you can eat pork, so they eat pork. But that's not what God said. You know, God was quite clear. So we're following here a way of life. So in the West, religion is secularized, it's a private thing, it's to do with your faith in your heart. Islam is not like that. Yes, it's faith in your heart, but it's external, it's also public. It's to do with society, it's to do with our relationships with people, it's to do with how we pray, what we eat, how we dress, etc., etc. It's a whole way of life, just as it is for the Orthodox Jew, just as it was for Jesus and Moses, just as it was for Muhammad. This is real religion. It's not just a belief in one God, although that's very, very important. Although that's very, very important. There's more to it than that, because God has actually asked us to follow a certain way of life, certain commands.
So as I stand here listening to you,
Sorry, it fell off. Yes. So if we're to be, I guess the final point is this: if we want to be authentic followers of Jesus today, in the West, anywhere, we should really follow Muhammad, because he is by far the closest spiritual and legal parallel with Jesus. And indeed, Muhammad said he hadn't brought anything new. He simply brought the same religion, but purified it of the excesses that Christians had introduced. The excesses would be the worship of Jesus. The excesses would be the abandonment of the law. Because Paul says the law has been abolished in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 15. Jesus, in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5, said, I have not come to abolish the law. We're supposed to obey it in a particular way, according to what Jesus taught. So a big emphasis on the interior following of the laws. It's not just you don't hate people, you don't murder people, you don't hate them. It's not just you don't commit adultery, you don't lust, etc. So he's made it very interior, and that's perfectly Islamic, because as you'll know from Islam, the intention, the niyat as it's called, is absolutely central. If I fast during Ramadan, but I'm not doing it for God, my fast is completely waste of space. It means nothing at all. Any action that I do if it's not an act of worship, and worship is a very broad category in Islam, doing the things that please God, avoiding the things that displease God, if I don't do any action according to what pleases God, it's worthless. So you have to have the intention.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Jesus taught in the Gospels. So the other thing is, Jesus said, and the Quran says this as well, that Jesus was only sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. In other words, to the Jews, the Israelites. He says that in Matthew 15. Muhammad said that he was also sent, but to mankind, as a mercy to mankind. So I'm not a Jew. I take it you're not a Jew. So we're not going to follow the Jewish Torah. We follow the last prophet of God.
That's exactly a question that came into my head while you were talking. Like in those 600 years after Jesus and before Muhammad, how should people believe that they were not born into Jews, they were not Jews? How should they?
Yeah, good question. I mean, for a while after Jesus ascended into heaven, there were followers of Jesus who kept the original religion of Jesus alive. Sometimes they're called Ebionites. That's one name for them in the 2nd century.
This is kind of what I meant by Unitarians,
Okay.
like the ones that believe in God, or they're not Jews.
No, these are people who follow the law. The
Jews?
Oh, yeah,
How
yeah,
do you
yeah.
call them?
Ebionites.
Ebionites.
Ebionite comes from the Hebrew word for poor. We're not quite sure why they were called that. But anyway, no, they followed the law. So they followed the religion of Jesus, not the religion about Jesus, which is what became dominant with
So they
the
kind of,
Gentiles.
accepted the laws of
Yes,
the Jews, but
yes.
they were not born into.
No, they were Jews.
Yeah.
They were Jews.
No, her question, like the non-Jews, what they used to practice if Jesus didn't come to them.
Because if you're not born from a Jewish mother,
Well, that's true for all of the non. That's true of everyone, regardless of the 600-year gap.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly,
so that's a question of humanity in general. What about the Chinese or the Aboriginals or the people
In
in
a way,
whatever?
actually, yes.
It's what about humanity? Oh, right, okay.
in a way.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So there is a tradition in Islam that God has sent, I think it's 125,000 prophets, I think that's the number,
So to all regions. of the
to
world.
all the people groups in the world. Now, it could be that people like Confucius or the original Buddha, for example, may have been messengers. I don't know that, but it's possible. The thing is with people like Buddha, their original message was probably not centered on themselves, but on being selfless and serving the divine. But quite soon afterwards, statues were built to the Buddha, and people used to worship statues, a bit like Mary, you know. So the religion quickly got corrupted, probably. It's like Zoroaster, you know, the original alleged founder of Zoroastrianism in Persia. These may have been prophets originally, or messengers, I should say, because messengers were sent to mankind. It's the prophets who were sent to their own people, I understand. So the idea that God has not left himself without a witness to people around the world. For Christians, it's more difficult because they just believe there's Israel and then there's like Jesus and Christianity. So what about people in the Amazon? And there's no answer to that
So
because
in-
Jesus never went to the Amazon.
So it is, yes. For the whole world, I find a slightly different question. It lies in the same line of thinking, but for this specific region, it's a very important region because this is where all the monotheistic developments were about the biggest religion at the moment. So somehow, purposefully perhaps, there was a gap of 600 years, and what about those people?
Well, yeah, coming back to the gap then, that's a different subject than the whole of humanity.
Yeah, I think so.
So we're coming
I
back
think
to the message of Jesus wasn't entirely lost for a couple of centuries. The Ebionites kept it alive. It did die out. And you know, the timing of sending God's messengers is in his timing. The Quran even mentions this gap as well. I don't know the answer, but I assume the timing was perfect.
What's your thought on it?
There's indeed some messengers you didn't know about, and like maybe they had some kind of religion for them, for that society, that these nations.
I mean, for the people in the region of Jerusalem and
Why
Mecca,
600 years?
Medina.
I don't know.
But there were Christians, as known to history, who did continue to follow, who didn't fall for Trinitarianism, who were still monotheist. So that continued, but ultimately it died out.
wiped out.
by
Well,
someone.
well, yeah, maybe. So the question is, why aren't you a Muslim?
Why am I not a Muslim? I had a brief conversation with
Sheikh Muhammad. Sheikh.
and my answer to him was like, I'm born into Christianity, and I question things, of course. I question things about Islam, I question things about Christianity. Because I haven't found the answers for myself, or I'm not convinced of the answers yet, I wouldn't switch yet. So first,
Have you read the Quran yet?
I still need like a few surahs left, and then I finished the
Oh, right, so you have most of the Quran.
most of it.
Ah, good.
Yeah.
Good.
He gave it to me.
Good,
so-
good. In Dutch or English or?
Dutch, yeah,
Dutch,
so it's a
good.
translation.
Oh, there is.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah. My Arabic is not at that level.
No, I didn't think it'd be in Arabic. No, in translation. Yeah.
So, yeah, looking into things, trying to find answers. But I also told my partner, like, I will start walking in a new direction as soon as I'm certain. I don't want to say first to my friends, yeah, I believe this, and then 2 weeks later, by the way, I think I believe this.
Yeah, of course. No, you need to think about it carefully.
So
Absolutely.
I rather want to take like,
Yeah.
perhaps it's too long, but for example 5 years, then 2 weeks every time I believe something else.
No. You need to take as long as you need to. Yeah. I think the key question for me is, how would Jesus have seen Islam in terms of its core beliefs? And I think he would have affirmed them. And then I would say, how would Jesus have seen Christianity as it evolved? And I think he would have seen it with horror, absolute horror, because it worshipped him. But he was a God-fearing, worshipping Jew. So Christianity has made him into a god, which is a blasphemy, it's idolatry. It's a very, very, very serious sin in Judaism, as it is in Islam. There's only one religion on the planet that I'm aware of that acknowledges Jesus and gives him his rightful status. And that's Islam. There's no other religion that does this. Nothing. Buddhism doesn't, Hinduism doesn't, whatever.
Judaism doesn't.
Judaism, unfortunately, that's the whole problem. If only it did, it rejects Jesus. There's only one religion that gets Jesus, and mentions him as an article of faith. If we were to reject Jesus, if I said, I don't agree with you, we would be out of Islam, just like that. By the very fact of denying Jesus, we'd be out of Islam. So it's an article of faith in Islam. You have to believe in Jesus. There's no other religion in the world that does that. Christianity has twisted the religion, made him into a god. Islam has it about right. So it's a no-brainer for me.
So these are like thoughts are popping up. Like I have no answer at all, or I haven't think it through, or I haven't looked it up yet. But if Jesus came, like how much influence did he actually have on the Jews? Because as you say, according to the Bible or how you interpret what the Bible says, he came for the Jews. So how much influence did he actually have on the Jews? Because apparently we created a whole new religion out of it because Jesus came, but how much influence did he actually have on the Jews themselves?
Well, Christianity is a Gentile religion. In fact, early in the 2nd century, people like Ignatius of Antioch, the bishop, who we have 7 of his letters, he tells people that Christianity is very, very different from Judaism. He says to people, don't follow Judaism. It's a different religion. But I'm thinking, there's a man called Bishop Ignatius of Antioch. He was from Antioch in what's now Syria. A very famous early church father. And we have some of his letters. This is AD 107, and he wrote them on his way to Rome to be executed as a martyr. So he wrote a series of letters when he was on his way to be martyred in Rome. And in one of them, he's very clear to those Christians who attempted to follow Judaism, who attempted to do it. Don't follow Judaism, it's nothing to do with us. Now, this is 107 AD. It's within 70, 80 years of Jesus' life. And now we have the church represented by him, and he was an early father, representing a religion that disowns the religion of Jesus. Isn't that amazing? Because Jesus was a Jew, he was an Israelite who practiced the law. And his followers are now saying, don't follow the religion of our founder. How crazy is that? Isn't that ironic? It's very, very ironic. But Muslims now follow exactly the same religion of Muhammad. So we have a famous hadith, the hadith Jibril, where Gabriel actually appeared to Muhammad and to his followers, and he taught them about the faith, the 5 pillars, about the 5 pillars of Islam, and the six pillars of faith, if you like. We should believe in God and his prophets and his angels and his books and so on. And that's how to remain unchanged. The belief is identical belief. There's been no change. It's the same Quran as well. But Christians follow a completely different religion than Jesus. Isn't that ironic?
Yeah, it is.
They call themselves Christians. They don't even follow his faith.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't make it up. I mean, it's so weird when you think about it. So weird.
And it's a really new thought. Like I tried to say, like Jesus came for the Jews. We just So I'm still like puzzled about how much influence did he have in the Jews. I'm not sure if I want this on camera.
I'm not sure I have an answer to that. I mean, how do we measure influence?
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know what that means.
How much influence they have used, and then actually there came this whole new religion. So if this whole new religion wasn't created about him or for him or whatever him, then what did Jesus actually do? This is almost blasphemy what I say here, but like what did he actually then? Yeah, he was sent to the world, but a new religion was created.
Well, he is known. Jesus is known throughout the world, but we're talking about him now. So what is his influence? It's colossal, it's cosmic, it's universal. We're still talking about him now. He's that, and his mother, of course, is also, there's a whole chapter of the Quran, as you know, named after Miriam, Mary. So these are some of the greatest messengers and prophets of God, and we're still talking about them now. His influence is colossal, far beyond Judaism. Some Christians worship him, some don't. So he is that. Is that remarkable? A messenger and prophet of God, absolutely. Prophet of God. So, so we're still talking about him now. That's how amazing he is.
But what do you think that he actually did for the Jews, or like did he fulfill his mission? How we can see his role?
Part of his mission in the Quran is to speak of another who was to come, who's variously known as Ahmed or the most praised one. And these are some of the names of the Prophet Muhammad. And there are indications, even in the Gospels we have now, that he was speaking about someone else who was to come after him. So that is also part of his mission, by the way.
What do you think his mission was?
To be the Messiah for the Jews, and they rejected
Oh, wait,
him.
no, in terms of his mission to Israel, I mean, that's an answer to that. I thought you...
No, also like his accomplishments.
Yeah, well, accomplishments, we'll leave that to God. I mean, I can't assess his accomplishment. But in terms of his mission, I think he called for a renewal of Judaism, a renewed spirituality that focused less on just the externals, but more on the fundamental matters of the law, which is justice, mercy, love, that sort of thing, but without neglecting the other aspects of the law. In fact, that's just a quote from Matthew 23:23, by the way, what I've just said. I've just literally quoted from that verse as a summary of his attitude to the law. So his whole attitude to the law is very Islamic. In other words, it's not just the exterior, it's the intention of the heart. Without the intention, it's worthless. So you can't just... It's no point... Jesus criticized some of the Pharisees, apparently, and called them whitened sepulchres. So a sepulchre is a coffin, and a white coffin. He called them like... Externally, they were very white and clean, but within, they were bones. They were rotting corpses. And that's an Islamic idea as well. So I could be externally, I could appear to do the right things, but if my heart's not right with God, and then I could be sent to hellfire. In fact, there are the wonderful hadith that speak of one man who could, this is on the Day of Judgment, who could recite the Quran and was known as a great scholar. And God says to him basically, why did you recite the Quran? Why were you a scholar? He said, oh, so I could glorify you, God. And God said, no, it wasn't. You did these things so that people might think that you were a great scholar and might praise you for being a reciter of the Quran. And he was sent to hell. Wow. It was a Muslim who recited the Quran and was a scholar, and he was sent to hell because he did it for the wrong. He did it to glorify his pride. And this is very like the teaching of Jesus here, I think. That's a great warning to all of us, to check ourselves and our motivations. So it's because I see, when I read the Hadith and I see the teaching of Jesus, even in the Gospels, such an overlap, a similarity, but a dissimilarity with later Christian doctrines that I see Muhammad and Jesus as spiritual brothers. They come from the same parent, if you like. It's obvious to me now. I can give hundreds and hundreds of examples of that.
But does
The rest is detail. So you asked me about his influence or where, I don't know. But did God send Jesus? I say yes. Did God send Muhammad? I say yes. That's it. The rest is just detail. I mean, maybe I know the answer to that problem or that problem, but in terms of the essentials, it's settled.
And do you think that Jesus as a Messiah, when he comes back, he's different than he was when he came in the first place?
Different in what sense? Different clothes? I mean,
I don't know, perhaps different attribute, different.
Oh, I see. No, he's still
Yes.
human. Still human. He's always human. Always human. He has a particular role in eschatology in the end times, which is a different subject. But and he will die, actually. And there's even a grave, an empty grave in Medina, next to the Prophet, waiting for him. It's quite amazing. So yeah.
I didn't know about this, yeah, but I remember I heard something like this some time ago. You just know.
Yeah.
So the Muslims made that for him ready, or?
Yeah. Because he will return. I mean, it's a Christian belief as well, but and he will do whatever the end times scenario says he will do, and then he will pass away.
But do you think Jesus has different attributes when he comes back? Exactly the same attribute.
No, he still was always only ever human.
Always have human.
Oh, he's never anything more than that. Just as Muhammad, they're all human beings. Never
I mean,
anymore.
like, for example, the way Jesus is described in the Bible is like very humble, very loving and kind human being, God made man.
But he's not. I think it's the opposite. He is portrayed as, you see, this is a very Christian point you've made, but the irony is the opposite is the truth. If you read the book of Revelation, the last book in the Bible, where we have Jesus killing his enemies on an industrial scale. He slaughters humanity. This is the loving Jesus, but you just spoke of.
This is exactly where I want to go. So during his lifetime, so when he was born, when he was living his life with his disciples, so those 30 years, a picture of him was portrayed, how he was, and then indeed in Revelations or when he comes back, his assignment is different at that moment, therefore he does different actions, and it's more like... So
well, it's no more Mr. Nice Guy. He then
he
slaughters
becomes
people.
Like a real leader, like a war hero.
But is that right? I don't necessarily think the portrait of Jesus in the Gospels is historical. I think one can question it because it's so unlike the other prophets in some ways, because he's a pacifist in the Gospels. But the problem is here's a guy who preaches pacifism, love your enemies, and Christians go, isn't he superior to Muhammad? And I'm saying, well, have you read the last book of the Bible? Because what he does there is far worse than anything Muhammad ever did. He slaughters whole sections of humanity, whole nations, he literally in blood. So there's an inconsistency there. It means what Jesus preached is forgotten about, and he's now a completely different creature. He's now this genocidal killer who just kills whole peoples. That doesn't strike. There's something wrong there. I think a more middle path is that Jesus is not quite how he is portrayed in the Gospels. That he did actually preach what is consistent with the other prophets, but he's not a bloodthirsty genocidal killer either, as the Bible says he is. I think these are two extremes that we can avoid, because we have the example of other prophets, and they're all ultimately the same. I don't think they're radically different.
Sometimes because of this talk, I came up with some new thoughts to think about. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I hope you. That's nice talking to you.
Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. What's your name again?
Fiona.
Fiona. Nice to speak to you, Fiona.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Take care.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Have a nice day.
You too. Bye bye.